Awesome. So I would like to welcome Dr. Sven Hildebrandt. He has been working at the intersection of blockchain and regulation since 2017 and has served as an advisor to a number of financial institutions. Dr. Sven is going to clarify ESG reporting requirements that have come in, set by regulators, and provide us with some insights around what potential consequences Bitcoin miners will face if they fall short of complying. So please raise your hands together for Dr. Sven.
Thank you very much. First of all, I think that's the hardest slot that you have because it's the last slot before actually we're having lunch. And then I'm talking about regulation, so I hope to make this fun for everyone. By the way, I really enjoy the conference so far because it's actually like new people in this space. I usually talk a lot to regulators and banks and people wearing ties and white shirts like Harald. It is really fun time being here, and I hope that I can share some thoughts that you haven't heard yet. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to dig deeper into the MiCA regulation. The MiCA is the Markets in Crypto Assets regulation. That is a regulation that covers complete Europe. By doing so, the MiCA regulation builds the biggest market in the world, the biggest unified market in the world for crypto assets. One thing that I want to say beforehand is that I didn't make the laws. I am not a regulator. I don't enforce them. What I do is that I tell you what is on the line. That is what I do. So keep calm. Don't shoot the messenger. So first of all, what do you have to know about the Markets in Crypto Assets regulation? First thing, it is a regulation. So there's no transposition in national law. That means that what the European regulator has set will come into force exactly the way that is set in that regulation. So there is no Italy making it a little bit otherwise, then Germany's going another route, France going another route. We have the whole European continent, and they all have to abide by this law. So actually, it is an important law. It's not some tiny little thing. It's big. With big, meaning it is the biggest, largest single market for crypto assets. So Europe now is the largest market in the world. And with the Markets in Crypto Assets regulation, there are uniform concepts and rules applicable to crypto asset issuers, so-called CAIs, as well as crypto asset service providers, so-called CASPs. And during my presentation, it will be necessary to be very precise with words. So I'm trying to help you guys a little bit. But one of the words that you definitely should remember is a CASP. That is a crypto asset service provider. A miner is not a CASP, right? A miner is not a CASP unless you only do mining. If you do mining and you have investors and those investors can buy Bitcoin from you, then you would be considered a CASP. So you have to be like really, really precise and look at the business model of what you are actually doing if you're falling under the CASP regulation or if you're not falling under the CASP regulation. And maybe to give you a little bit of background why you should even listen to me, reason why you should listen to me is that I have been following the space since 2017, especially when it comes to the regulatory part. I was founding member of the NATPA, that's the International Association of Trusted Blockchain Applications that works together with the European Commission. I know Mr. Berger quite well, who was actually the rapporteur on the Econ Committee. So I've been around with that regulation for a little while. The specific part of that regulation that we're talking about will be coming into force in December 20th, 2024 for every crypto asset service provider. And what I already said, a pure miner, and this is important to know, a pure miner is not a CASP. But there are several things that I will be stating in my talk a little bit later. I think we are at a point where miners, and especially mining pools, looking at all the mining pool providers out here, should work together to actually work towards a better understanding of how this actually works. So what concrete are the ESG disclosure requirements for CASPs? And we've seen that in the talk of Daniel, who I like a lot, and we've seen that in the talk right beforehand as well. These are the 6 different disclosure requirements that you have. And the guys were, I think, shouting at the transaction reporting, so that they said that the transaction reporting is fundamentally flawed, like this definition of a transaction. And there you have it, right in there, multiple times. So you have energy intensity, that's kilowatt hour per transaction, and then you have GHG intensity, and that's also kilogram per transaction. I did, once again, not write that regulation, but this is how it is. So there are several ways of how you or we as an industry can actually work with this now. A common thing that I see, which I believe is fundamentally wrong, is to say, that's regulators, that's all bullshit, we're not listening to it, we're not digging into it, we're not even trying to understand it. And I can't emphasize that enough, that is fundamentally wrong. If you want to be part of an industry that is and will be regulated even more, you can still dislike regulation, but you have to understand it. Because if you don't understand the regulation, and if you don't put input into understanding it, then you don't know like where this will be going, where this will be shifting, and also what you can do in order together with maybe the regulators in order to go into the right direction if you see fit. At least that's my point of view. So the question now arises, I'm going back to that, so these 6 numbers must be reported by every crypto asset service provider by December 30th, when they are applying for the MiCA license, when they get the MiCA license, which all of the reputable players will be doing. So everybody is now in the process of actually obtaining it. And then it is a must-have to do that, right? It is a, yes. No, that doesn't, well. So first you said, does that include US miners? You have to be more precise than that. If you are a US miner and you have your things in the US and you're just mining in the US and then you're taking your tokens and then you're selling them in the US market, then no. If you are a Coinbase, for example, so if you're a US entity and if you're an exchange and you're also running the services in Europe, definitely yes. Right? So all of the exchanges, all of the custodians, all of the asset managing companies, all of them are like right there. But I will be coming onto that specific section. So what you're doing right now is you're trying to find like your excuse, like, oh cool, I'm just a miner and that doesn't bother me, but it bothers you at the end, and I'll be coming to that point as well. But thanks for like shooting that at me. So this has to be reported. If you don't report it, you either don't get your MiCA license or you lose it. It's as simple as that. And now we can argue for 15,000 years if that makes sense or not, but I'm not going to do this because it's just the law. It's as simple as that, and I'm not judging that. So now the challenge is, you need to obtain ESG data from the assets that you have listed on your exchange. I'm going to use, let's use Binance as an example. So, well, maybe not because of the regulatory stance. Let's use Coinbase. Let's use Coinbase as an example. So you're Coinbase, and you're operating your exchange, and you want to stay compliant with the law, all given that. Then you are obliged to report this ESG data. And the whole thinking of that ESG data reporting was based on some, I would call it like old world thinking, because in the old world thinking, you have a party or somebody who is actually emitting that token. So you have a party that you can identify, that you can go to and say, hey, how much energy does your network consume per transaction? But this doesn't work in decentralized systems, right? So but that was like kind of like the basis and the ground for everything. So now we're having a problem because you, as a crypto asset service provider, you must report something, but in order to report, it's actually getting very tricky because getting the data is extremely hard. And here you can see, and I actually made this slide today after we heard the talks. So who are the players in the market? Like who's around? You probably know that guy right there on the left. We've heard about him. You don't know him, or you? Well, was it like boo or something like boo? Yeah. So well, actually, that's Alex de Vries, the beloved central banker from the Netherlands. Then these other two you already heard today, and then on the right-hand side you see Alex Neumüller from Cambridge, who is indeed actually trying to do a good job. But he is, as all of us, trying very, very hard to get the right data. And to get the right data, you need to have a collaboration between the big mining pools and the big miners, because this is where the best data are, and they're very reluctant to share any of that data. And I think that is something that we as an industry should be working on, because I believe that both have a mutual goal, and there are ways of sharing data in a way that pools and also miners don't get compromised. But that's something we can take off of the stage. And then there are two companies who are engaging with that professionally. And disclaimer, one of this is the company I'm heavily invested in, and that's the one on the right-hand side. The one on the left-hand side we already heard about in your talk, right? So you were pulling up the figures that were there, and I explicitly did something for you on the next slide, because this is a little bit of history where you can see where the methodology is coming from. So when you're looking at the CCRI methodology, and we are all big fans of Alex de Vries, we can see that they have actually worked together quite closely in the past, which I'm not judging, which I'm just making transparent. We've not done so. And one thing that I'd like to point out, this was also because you pointed this out on the Cardano side of things, what I believe is something that is pretty good about the CCRI is that they're actually are being transparent in the right way, because they actually state what is happening. So what they state is they cite something, and then there is the little footnote with the transparency note that they say that some of the industry reports that they have been cited to back their own things that are built on top of that were commissioned by Avalanche, Tron, Polygon, and Consensus. So transparent, that's what they are, absolutely, in the footnote. That also inflicted some critical reporting by Forbes. This, interestingly, I haven't seen on the slides that have been shown here today. So there's a big Forbes article, actually, going on. They were like digging deeper into that subject, and they were trying to expose like how the methodology works and who actually paid what. And I really like to follow the money, because that sometimes makes sense. So when you know where the money is coming from, that is something that might sometimes shift your perception of things. And by the way, as I know that this topic is going to be hopefully heavily debated, I'll be ending my my talk earlier, so that we actually have a way to engage further. So, giving all that information, so we're having some people who are engaging in that field, and we're having basically two companies who are engaging in that field. When we were trying to enter that state of play, I made up my mind with my crew, and we were thinking about where will the central point of information, where the regulators will be looking at their figures, where will this probably evolve? And we've seen this very beautiful picture of the Alex de Vries's article, and then when it all trickled down, we were basically searching for who will be the Alex de Vries for the regulators, right? And we believe that the Digital Token Identifier Foundation will become that monopoly of regulatory ready information. Why do we believe that? The Digital Token Identifier Foundation is a non-profit of a English company, and that English company is very well known in the data space in the financial world, and they have won the, it's not really a tender, but they have, I'll just call it tender, they won the tender for issuing the ISO standard for the digital token number. Well, actually, that is important. So if you have a token and you want to identify this token for whatever reason that might be, you want to list it on your platform, you want to trade it, you want to do anything with that, you're getting into a lot of issues with identifying the right token. Let's say you have a Tether token. Then we would use Tether as a name. But it does make a difference if that is a Tether that is running on the Ethereum blockchain, if that's a Tether running on the Tron network, or stuff like that. And there was, before ISO came up with those numbering scheme, there was no worldwide association, well-known worldwide association, that actually gives these numbers to the tokens. So actually, I believe the ISO standard is a very good idea for the industry. And we've been working with them together very closely, and we have signed a contract with them that we are the only company who is able to push ESG data into that digital token identifier database, which I believe was a pretty cool deal because like we're sitting with our ESG data directly where the ISO standards of the token numbers is. That was quite cool. And I made this little remark, like regulators might not use Daniel's Twitter as their trusted source of information, not by diminishing Daniel's work, but it's just not the way how regulators work, right? So they're not looking up the Twitter space of Daniel Batten and say, hey, this is cool. They want to have a database with a stamp on it that says, okay, this is the ISO database, and that's where they will be looking at. And if I were a regulator, I would do it just the same way. So what can and should you do, in my point of view? So if you were a pool, a mining pool, you're sitting on the best data that we can have to actually achieve our goal. I've been talking to pools. I had hair before, right? so I've been talking to pools for the longest time, and they're sitting on extremely valuable data that is already there, but they're reluctant to share because of privacy reasons. I tried and I know Daniel does this too, and you know we all try very hard to get our hands on this data, and we even allow stuff like abstractions on country level. We do countries where it says just other, so we don't dive like very deep into the numbers because some pools might be reluctant in making transparent how much percentage in which country is actually located at. So we've catered for all that, but still we're not getting onto the data that they already have, and we would desperately need to make our research better. Because if we don't have better data, and this is something where I would disagree with Daniel, because I would say, well, there's always a way to make the information better, but if we don't have that information, then somebody will always get into this little gap and actually fill this information gap and says, okay, one Bitcoin transaction uses a swimming pool of water, and if you don't have any better data to debunk it, then you have a problem. So if you're a pool, come and talk to me. Trust me. So the same goes with miners. So we did an analysis of all the publicly listed miners and looked at their reports using artificial intelligence even to find out like which models they are using and how much hash rate, like the model of the miners, and which hash rate they're using and where this is where the electricity is actually coming from. If they would just provide us with that data that they have, and by the way, they all share with Foreman. So most of the big mining companies using Foreman or a lot of don't want to make advertising for anybody, but a lot of the big mining companies use Foreman as a tool to orchestrate their mining operations. Foreman has all the data. And with Foreman, they're not, they're okay with that. But all the data that is in Foreman, that's basically the data that we would desperately needing as well. And they don't have a problem with sharing this with Foreman. So why with us? Well, maybe because, we're too near to the regulator, maybe. Coming to the proof of work protocols. And I know that there's some of the proof of work guys actually sitting in this room here. In order to be able to make better data, just better data, we need to work together in order to produce that, even if you believe that at the end, it is still not perfect or very, very far from perfect. But if you're better than nothing, you're still better. That is the information that I want to relay. And why? I already touched on that. Because if we, as an industry, don't take this space, somebody else will take this space. And I would rather prefer to be in this space of communication, because if you are not in the space of communication, then there are other people taking that space of communication, then we have that trickle-down effect that we've seen early in the day. And now, and this is the last slide, and then we can discuss a little bit. So why should an American miner do? Why should they even care? Why should somebody from Asia even care? Why should Bitmain, Antpool, F2 Pool, why should they care? It's a very good question. Why should they care? And the answer is simple. Regulation always spills over. So if you have the largest regulated space in the world, which Europe will be, then all of the other jurisdictions will be looking at that jurisdiction and will see, okay, what did they do? What did they invent? How did they do it? Is there some piece that I can take out of? And if so, what do I do with that? So regulation always spills over, which is also normal. I mean, if I would be a regulator, I would do the same thing. I would be looking at the other guys, and I would say, okay, what have they done? What went good? What went bad? And then I would, pick my best pieces. This is how things and evolution goes. Yeah? If you have a good miner, if you have a good mining machine, then it is natural that the competitor will look at that mining machine and will try to make it better. I mean, that's just the way it works. And unfortunately, we have made the experience that the better product or the better idea does not always win. So when we have seen a Betamax and VHS, for example, the video cassette things, well, this is good. This is a crowd that all knows that still. Well, hopefully. Or most of them, let's say, most of them still know that. So the Betamax was technically the better thing to do, right? But VHS still won, or VHS still won, because there was better marketing and more pressure behind it. And my doubt is, if we are just trying to be Betamax and are trying to be technically totally sound and the better thing, but leaving out the communication scheme of things, then we could actually lose that position. And with the point, every data point and open exchange also about consensus mechanism helps. I would like to close this down, and this is 2 minutes before the time to start a fiery talk about regulation. Thank you very much.
Any questions?
Yes, I have a very basic question. So, who voted for this law?
Who voted for that?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Who is okay with this? Because we are European. It's democracy.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's a very good.
The citizens of Europe have to have approved this, right?
Yes, so that is a very good question, and I can even go a little bit deeper into that because it was a very interesting development. So while the MiCA regulation was developed, there are certain stages how this happens. So the first stage is that some politicians come up with, they're saying, oh, we have to regulate it somehow, which is okay, and then the people in the European Commission, they come up with a draft. And that draft then is openly publicated on the website. And they are inviting every European citizen, so if you are in Europe, you could have done that too, to actually report on that and say what you like about it or what you don't like about it. That's actually public. Yeah? And I'm always trying to get more people from the space to actually, move your butts and report on that and go, yeah? But they just see this word regulation, then they're like, no, I don't want that. So when it comes to the MiCA regulation, there was very interesting developments because the point in time where the European Commission, that's the European Commission that voted, and there's a specific Econ committee, when they voted, 4 days before they should have actually voted on that, there was the latest draft developed. And in the latest draft, they added 4 words that would have had completely banned proof of work in all over Europe. 4 words in the whole, and it has 400 pages. So you have to find 4 words in 400 pages. And then the whole community just went on it. And what you see now with the ESG disclosure requirements was then the compromise, because the Greens said, if you don't put anything like this in, we're going to not sign MiCA at all. So that was the compromise. So who votes for that? That's the Econ Committee and the European Commission.
The mic?
Thanks for the talk. I had a question. You briefly showed a slide that indicated requirements for folks who write, quote, white papers for protocols. I wonder if you can talk a little bit more about what that means, particularly because the way that I was looking at these ESG requirements, kind of uninformed, is that they're really talking about the implications of consensus mechanisms, say proof of work versus proof of stake versus all sorts of things. And there exist many transaction protocols that to some extent can be independent of the consensus mechanism. And so suppose that I have written such things, suppose that I, in the vague sense, end up writing a cryptographic mathematical paper that describes a transaction protocol that is roughly independent of the consensus mechanism, for which there effectively is no ESG type data that's specific to that. Like, where does that fit under this? I mean, is that a white paper that now all of a sudden I can't make this available in Europe because I don't have ESG data, or?
Yeah, love this.
What's a white paper for them?
Well, yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for the question. Great question. First of all, there is, and I actually do believe that this was a regulatory mistake. There is a mismatch between the ESG data requirements and the requirements of publishing a white paper. So, yeah, and it was very interesting because we even wrote a complete article on CoinDesk on especially this thing. So you have to report the ESG data requirements as of December 30th, 2024, if you are a CASP or if you apply as a CASP. But for the MiCA white papers, there is a period until 2027. It's like 2 years after 2026, 2 years after. So there's a point in time where you don't have to have that white papers out, but 2 years after that, if that asset is already listed. If that asset is not already listed, so you're programming something for yourself and it's a new token and it's coming up, right?
I'm talking about even beyond that. I mean, so for example, like
nobody has made up their minds yet. Nobody has made up their minds yet. There even is no definition of what a transaction is in the regulation. So what I'm trying now to wrap my head around is the question of how do I deal with Lightning?
Yeah.
Because when we Lightning and all of the other layer 2s, so you have Bitcoin.
And layer 3s.
What's that?
Layer 3.
And layer 3s. Hey, come on, layer 3s, right? so I mean, let's be as simple as it gets, right? Let's just look at Bitcoin, like the most traded asset. Let's just look at Bitcoin. And you don't have a definition of what a Bitcoin transaction is. So how do we measure that, right?
Yeah.
So then it gets hard. But this is exactly the interesting part, and this is what I believe is very, very interesting in regulation as well. If it is not defined yet, you can define it. Then you can say, hey, I've looked at the regulation, we're trying to do it our very best, and we are really, really, really trying it very hard to do it our very best. Then we define a Bitcoin transaction, including, for example, also a type of a Lightning transaction as well, because you have to open up a channel here, you have to open up a channel there, and there's transactions going on. So why shouldn't we count these transactions going on in the channel as transactions? That doesn't make any sense. But we're regulatory-wise, that's not even considered yet.
All right.
And please, everybody, find me afterwards. I'll be here all day. Yeah.
And speaking of all day, at the end of the day, Hive has generously donated food and drinks, so we'll be having a lot of fun at a restaurant just below after the conference is over. So thank you. It's a lot to think about.